My name is David O'Brien, and this presentation is going to be on Erwin Panofsky, art historian and educator. Erwin Panofsky was a German-Jewish member of academia who became a vital figure in modern art historical scholarship due to his revolutionary theories which introduced a contextualist appraisal of formalist art history traditions. His approach to deciphering hidden meaning in the works of art played a singularly influential role in securing a respected position for the discipline of art history. Panofsky's energetic curiosity knew few bounds within the world of art history, delving into sculpture and painting as well as the historical and cultural contextual settings in which the works were situated. Panofsky's greatest influence is felt in his defining iconographical studies, which search for hidden meaning and content in primarily medieval and Renaissance artworks. During the 1930s, Panofsky was part of a group of Jewish scholars and scientists that were referred to collectively as backhanded gifts of Hitler to America, and their influx into the States deeply enriched scholarship in the sciences and the discipline of art history. Panofsky was born in Hanover, Germany on March 30th in 1892. Most of the young Panofsky's life was spent in Berlin, where he attended the famous Joachimsthal Gymnasium. In his 20s, wanting to please his father, Panofsky initially studied law, but soon abandoned it in order to enter the fledgling field of art history scholarship. Panofsky studied under Wilhelm Vogt at the University of Freiburg, where he would receive his doctorate in 1914. His first paper, Das Problem des Stils und der Bildenden Kunst, in 1915, explored an all-encompassing approach to the history and culture of art. Panofsky was invited to develop an art history department at the University of Hamburg, where he became its unofficial director, though only possessing the title of Privatdozent, or outside lecturer. It was at the University of Hamburg that Panofsky came in contact with Aby Warburg's teachings, which focused on viewing works of art in regards to their social and cultural function. Panofsky's colleagues' pioneering approach interpreted art from a historical and anthropological viewpoint, and would later gain worldwide recognition as iconology, and obviously influenced Panofsky's future direction. An even earlier influence on the young historian was Heinrich Wölfflin, the world's most preeminent art historian at the time. Wölfflin's art history interpretive style is based on two roots of style, wherein the first was distinguished by an artist's individual style, and the second was what Wölfflin referred to as forms of beholding. These forms were specific to each period in the history and development of art. Wölfflin's influence on Panofsky was one based on Panofsky's dissenting view, which insisted that the content inherent in works of art are just as important as their formalistic qualities. The scholar who had the greatest influence on Panofsky was Hamburg University's Ernst Cassirer. Cassirer's term symbolic form was heavily influenced by Kant, and asserted that, in general, art and other symbolic creative pursuits did not seek to imitate reality, but was actually how humans discovered it. Cassirer identified the increasing importance of the visual over the written and spoken, or more concisely, how we've begun to think in images. Panofsky's own personal philosophy, strengthened from proximity and interaction with great minds, was steeped in the philosophy of humanism. In accord, Panofsky was fluent in Greek and Latin, and felt strongly that the function of the historian was to restore the heritage of the great civilizations by endowing ancient records with dynamic life. Humanism to Panofsky meant respecting history and tradition while rejecting authority that did not operate under reason and moral laws. Panofsky said, quoting Ficino, that history is necessary not only to make life agreeable, but also to endow it with moral significance. It seems an obvious assumption that Panofsky's humanistic perspective was strengthened by his experiences with Nazism, which stood in opposition to all he held dear. Works of art in Panofsky's mind were primarily created as objects that served practical functions, either as tools or methods of communication, while also having the purpose of providing an aesthetic experience. In a quote that serves as an introduction to his iconology, Panofsky said, "In a work of art, form cannot be divorced from content. The distribution of color and lines, light and shade, volumes and planes, however delightful as visual spectacle, must also be understood as carrying a more than visual meaning. Panofsky's greatest contribution to the discipline of art history and scholarship is his iconological method, which focuses on enriching understanding of works of art in relation to the historical and cultural framework in which they were made. This methodology sought to break from the preoccupation with formalism, which he felt removed the object from its cultural and historical surroundings. Formalism had dominated the discipline of art history up until the time he started to develop his ideas. He readily admitted the pitfalls that were present in all attempts at interpreting works of art, especially how the act is influenced by the scholar's own historical position. Panofsky, in regards to addressing meaning to artistic representation, said, "If every ordinary plant, architectural detail, implement, or piece of furniture could be conceived of as a metaphor, how are we to decide where the general metaphorical transfiguration of nature ends and the actual specific symbolism begins?" In response to this dilemma, he asserted that the answer could be found in common sense and the diligent use of historically reliable knowledge and methods. Panofsky's personal interpretive system was based on the assumption that an ideal set of steps could lead to accurately attributing meaning to works of art. His eventual tiered system consisted of 3 separate levels. The first primary or external level consisted of pre-iconographical description, which involves practical experience of knowing representative objects and their objective and subjective significance, often referred to as artistic motifs. The secondary, or iconography proper, level encompasses conventional subject matter, which derives conventional meaning from cultural traditions. These include the knowledge of text and the relation of artistic compositions to concepts or themes. For example, a white-haired bearded man wearing a top hat decorated with red, white, and blue stars and stripes is generally interpreted as Uncle Sam's, whereas a similar person without this style of dress is not. Panofsky's third and deepest level is called iconology, or intrinsic meaning. This level deals with a work of art's basic relationship to the totality of the historical processes. It is found by unearthing those tendencies that are unique to a particular attitude of a nation, period, class, religion, or philosophical persuasion that persuade an artist to approach a work in a particular way during a certain time in history. His deep roots in the humanistic tradition made him inherently predisposed towards certain artworks while disdainful of others. He was known to refer to works depicting everyday life, landscapes, still lifes, and portraiture not approved of by the scholarly elite as non-subjects. In a quote that reveals a somewhat narrow vision of what works deserved his scholarly attentions, Panofsky referred to Vincent van Gogh as a genius without talent. His view of the majority of 20th century art was equally disdainful, remarking that it lacked any sort of iconography at all, and did nothing to challenge the educated viewer's intellect, as it lacked intricacy and depth. The 20th century did produce a scant few artists that intrigued Panofsky. He reportedly liked Mondrian, whose self-imposed restrictions fascinated the classical scholar. He was also known to have an appreciation for Modigliani, whose unique figures he compared to Michelangelo's. Surprisingly enough, the 20th century's contribution of moving pictures garnered the most enthusiasm from Panofsky. He viewed the medium of film as one of having very iconographic properties, being the heir of tradition of symbolism and of the old meanings connected with images. Panofsky asserted that the cinema was the single greatest contributor to modern culture, and that its loss would have greater effect than if all painting, sculpture, and poetry were to disappear. It seems that Panofsky was nearly universally loved by his students and fellow scholars, with whom he would enthusiastically engage in lively conversations, always welcoming dissenting opinions, and on a wide range of topics. Due to the necessity of long, tedious hours spent alone, researching for his writing, Panofsky saw teaching as a breath of fresh air, and he approached it with a happy intensity. To Panofsky, the perfect interaction that occurs between teacher and pupil was described as the joyful, instructive experience which comes from a common adventure into the unexplored. As an early testament to his devotion towards his students, Panofsky, after being relieved of his position at Hamburg University by Nazi laws, continued to help his doctoral students finish their studies from his own small apartment. It was his forced removal from the university in 1933 that resulted in his eventual emigration to the States, which he referred to as an expulsion into paradise. He took up a full-time position at Princeton University and also taught part-time at NYU until 1935. Panofsky was invited to join the Institute for Advanced Studies in 1935, where he joined other famous minds such as Oppenheimer and Einstein. He continued to put on graduate seminars and lectures at Princeton University and NYU, and remained at the Institute until 1962, when he retired from his post there. By emigrating to the United States, Panofsky's writing was freed from the historical weight of the German academic language tradition of the 1920s. The lectures he gave in American universities resulted in his producing books that most likely would have never been published had he remained in Germany. Erwin Panofsky's achievements in the discipline of art historical research are unmatched in their breadth. His Albrecht Dürer, published in 1943, is widely accepted as the most complete artist monograph of our time. His works include 18 books and 80 articles, which often approach the size of books themselves, all of which consistently demonstrate an enjoyable combination of the American essay style, strengthened by typical German attention to detail. Some of these published works include Studies in Iconology, 1939, The Life and Art of Albrecht Dürer, 1943, Early Netherlandish Painting, 1953, and Tomb Sculpture, in 1964. In addition to scholarly texts, there are about 27,000 letters to and from Panofsky that exist in public and private collections. Panofsky was given membership to many academic societies, was bestowed with countless honorary degrees, including an honorary doctorate from Utrecht University in 1935, as well as Germany's highest national honor, the Pour le Mérite, bestowed in the last year of his life. Panofsky, while at NYU, was elected the first Samuel F. B. Morse Professor of the Literature of the Arts of Design. Widely regarded as the world's most influential art historian and scholar, Panofsky died on March 14, 1968. His incredibly deep and rich body of work, immensely popular lectures, and singular contribution of iconographical methodology has had immeasurable influence on the discipline and direction of modern art historical scholarship, research, and education. While there can be no denying the gargantuan presence Panofsky held in modern art historical scholarship and research, it also cannot be ignored that he was a man who, by the fact of his life experiences, viewed his studies through a colored lens. His crowning achievement of iconological study methodology is still a powerful tool for deciphering meaning within works of art, if we only heed Panofsky's own words to make sure that our research is tempered by diligent use of historical, reliable knowledge and methods, and of course, common sense.